Have you ever read about a big cyber attack, maybe a data breach or ransomware, and it just feels really complicated, like a mystery wrapped in tech jargon?
Yeah.
You're left wondering, how do these attackers actually operate? What if, there was a way to understand exactly how they pull these things off, like a universal language for cyber threats?
There actually is something very much like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And today we're diving into what many in cybersecurity see as exactly that, the essential decoder ring or blueprint. We're talking about the MITRE ATT&CK framework.
Oh, MITRE ATT&CK. I've heard a lot about it.
Right. It was developed by the MITRE Corporation, started back in 2013, and then released to the public in 2015. And its purpose is pretty revolutionary, really. It's a standardized way to describe how cyber adversaries behave, all based meticulously on real-world observations and incidents, not just theory.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is basically to pull back the curtain. We want to look at the why, the tactics, and the techniques behind these attacks, right, across different digital worlds.
Exactly. And we'll use concrete, real-life examples. This isn't just academic. It's what's actually happening out there. Understanding it gives us, well, a significant edge.
And it covers different areas, doesn't it? Not just corporate networks.
That's right. It covers 4 main, let's call them battlegrounds: enterprise, mobile, industrial control systems, ICS, and, of course, the cloud. Each one has its own unique features and threats.
Okay, brilliant. Let's unpack this framework then. Let's see how it helps us dissect the anatomy of a cyber attack.
Absolutely. It's genuinely an invaluable tool. It helps defenders, think like attackers and really systematically break down how a compromise actually happens. So we'll start with the biggest one, the Enterprise ATT&CK matrix. This is the most comprehensive. It covers your traditional IT stuff, Windows, Mac OS, Linux, but also cloud services, network gear, containers, virtualization, the works. It's huge. We're talking 14 tactics and literally hundreds of techniques and even sub-techniques. Now, each technique has a specific ID, which is super useful for security teams, but today we'll focus more on the concepts and the real-world impact.
Hundreds.
Yeah.
Oh, that's incredibly detailed. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. Before an attacker even tries to break in, what's step one?
That first step is reconnaissance. This tactic is purely about gathering information, planning future moves. It's that initial intel gathering phase.
Okay.
A key technique here is active scanning. That's where adversaries actively probe networks, looking for vulnerabilities, mapping out the target.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about the SolarWinds supply chain attack back in 2020. Attributed to APT-29 or Cozy Bear, a Russian state-sponsored group, they use active scanning very carefully to find weaknesses in the SolarWinds Orion software supply chain. And they also focused heavily on gathering victim identity information mapping networks, identifying key people and big targets like U.S. government agencies.
It's like a spy doing their homework, right?
Yeah.
They're not even trying the door yet. They're just drawing up blueprints, figuring out who's who.
Exactly. They're casing the joint, digitally speaking.
So what's the key takeaway for us there?
Well, the crucial thing to grasp is that good defense isn't just about blocking the actual attack. It's also about disrupting this prep phase. If you can spot them or deter them during reconnaissance, you might stop the whole attack before it even gets going.
Makes sense. So they've done their homework. What's the next logical move?
That leads right into resource development. This is where they actually build or acquire what they need for the attack. Creating malware, getting infrastructure ready.
Heading up shop.
Pretty much. Techniques here include things like acquiring infrastructure, and maybe buying domains, compromising cloud accounts, and developing capabilities, which means building their own custom malware or finding exploits.
Okay, got an example of that kind of digital arsenal building.
Definitely. The Conti ransomware campaign, which was really active around 2021-2022, is a perfect illustration. Conti used acquired infrastructure, setting up their command and control C2 servers using compromised cloud accounts. They also heavily invested in developing capabilities, creating custom ransomware. Their setup was pretty sophisticated: dark pool domains, VPNs, all designed for persistent attacks.
Wow. What's fascinating there is how much effort goes in before the attack even launches. It shows real planning, real investment.
It does. And for defenders, understanding this pre-attack phase is critical. It tells you adversaries are often playing a long game. They're setting the stage very carefully.
Okay, so resources are ready. Then comes the moment they actually try to get in. Initial access.
That's it. Gaining that first foothold in the target network.
How do they usually do that? What are the common doors in?
Well, common techniques include phishing those malicious emails we all unfortunately know about, and also exploiting public-facing applications. That means targeting vulnerabilities in things like web servers, VPNs, anything accessible from the internet.
Right.
The Microsoft Exchange server attacks in 2021, linked to the Hafnium group, really showcase this. They exploited multiple zero-day vulnerabilities in Exchange using that public-facing application vector to deploy web shells and get that initial way into thousands of organizations globally. A huge impact.
So once they're inside, they need to actually run their bad code, which brings us to execution.
Correct. Execution is the tactic focused on getting malicious code to run on a compromised system. Techniques here might involve using a command and scripting interpreter, like running PowerShell or Python scripts, or relying on user execution, which means tricking a user into clicking or opening something malicious.
Ah, the human element again.
Always a factor.
Oh, yeah.
Emotet, that infamous banking Trojan active roughly 2019 to 2021, was a master of this. It used user execution via phishing emails with malicious Word documents. User opens the doc, enables macros, and boom, PowerShell scripts execute, downloading more malware. It spread like wildfire.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it? Even complex attacks can hinge on one click. And they don't just want to get in and run something once, they want to stay. That sounds like persistence.
Precisely. Persistence is all about maintaining that access over time. Surviving reboots, credential changes, things like that. Techniques like creating a scheduled task or job, or maybe account manipulation, are common ways to achieve this. Not pet your ransomware, for example, the one linked to Russia's Sandworm group in 2017, it used scheduled tasks on Windows systems. That ensured the ransomware would just re-execute after a reboot, helping it spread incredibly quickly and destructively.
That really highlights how a single breach isn't the end, is it? It's often just the start of a longer campaign. Constant vigilance needed.
Absolutely. Continuous monitoring is key.
And once they're persistent, they often want more power, more control. That leads to privilege escalation, right?
Yes, exactly. Privilege escalation is about gaining higher level permissions, moving from maybe a standard user account up to administrator or system level control. Techniques like process injection, putting malicious code into legitimate running processes, or access token manipulation, stealing, or forging system tokens are key here.
Can you give an example?
WannaCry ransomware in 2017 is relevant here. While it initially got in using that Eternal Blue exploit, exploiting a public-facing service, it then used techniques related to access token manipulation to elevate its privileges on Windows systems. That allowed it to encrypt files much more broadly and rapidly across networks.
And all the while, they're trying not to get caught. Sneaking around. That's defense evasion.
Absolutely critical for them. Defense evasion is all about avoiding detection by security tools, by analysts, by anything watching. This could involve obfuscated files or information like encoding malware payloads so antivirus doesn't recognize them, or even impaired defenses, which is literally trying to disable security software or logging.
Turning off the alarms.
Essentially, yes. TrickBot malware, which was a big problem from around 2018 to 2022, was notorious for this. It used heavily obfuscated files to hide its payloads. And it actively tried to impair defenses, specifically targeting things like Windows Defender, to allow it to stick around and often deliver secondary payloads like the Ryuk ransomware.
It really shows they're not just breaking in. They're actively fighting back against the security measures once inside. And part of that fight often involves getting usernames and passwords, credential access.
That's right. Credential access is focused purely on stealing account names and passwords or other secrets to gain access to more systems or data. Techniques include OS credential dumping, pulling credentials directly from system memory, like the LSASS process on Windows or from files, and also brute force attacks, just trying lots of passwords or cracking password hashes.
Who's used that effectively?
The LAPSU group in 2022 made headlines using OS credential dumping. They hit major companies like NVIDIA and Samsung, extracting credentials from compromised systems. They also reportedly used brute force against accounts with weak passwords to gain initial or wider access.
So they're in, maybe they've got admin rights, they've got credentials. Now they need to figure out the lay of the land. That sounds like discovery.
Discovery is exactly that. Exploring the environment to understand its structure, find valuable systems, locate sensitive data, basically mapping the internal network. Techniques include network service discovery, scanning for open ports and running services, and file and directory discovery, looking through the file systems for interesting stuff.
Like digital reconnaissance, but inside the network.
Precisely. The DarkSide ransomware group, famous for the Colonial Pipeline attack in 2021, heavily used discovery. They use network service discovery to map out the pipeline's infrastructure. And they used file and directory discovery to pinpoint the most valuable data for encryption, maximizing their leverage for the ransom demand.
Which highlights how important internal network segmentation is for defenders, right?
Yeah.
If they can't easily discover other valuable parts of the network, it limits their movement.
Absolutely. Limiting visibility is key.
And speaking of movement, once they know where things are, they try to spread. That's lateral movement.
Lateral movement is how attackers move from one already compromised system to other systems within the same network. Using remote services is a very common technique here. Things like RDP, remote desktop protocol, SMB file shares, or SSH. Basically, using legitimate tools for malicious purposes.
Any big examples?
The Revel ransomware attack on Kaseya VSA in 2021 is a prime case. Revel leveraged the Kaseya software itself that also used remote services like RDP to move laterally across the networks of managed service providers, or MSPs. This allowed them to deploy their ransomware not just to the MSPs, but to hundreds, maybe thousands, of their downstream clients. A devastating supply chain effect via lateral movement.
So they're moving around, mapping, grabbing credentials.
Yeah.
What are they actually trying to get? That must be collection.
Collection is where they actually gather the data they're interested in. This could be sensitive files, intellectual property, emails, database contents, whatever their objective is. Techniques like data from local system just grabbing files off the disk, or specific things like email collection are key here.
Like reading someone's mail.
Exactly. The APT-28, also known as Fancy Bear, hack of the DNC back in 2016 is a classic example. This Russian group used email collection techniques to harvest a vast number of emails from the Democratic National Committee's servers. They then staged that collected data, getting it ready for the next step, exfiltration, with the aim of influencing the U.S. election.
So they've collected the goods, but they need to stay in control, talk back to their malware. That sounds like the brain of the operation command and control.
Yes. Command and control, often shortened to C2 or CNC, is all about establishing and maintaining communication between the attacker and the compromised systems. It's how they send commands and receive data. Techniques include using standard application layer protocols like HTTP or HTTPS to blend C2 traffic with normal web traffic. Using an encrypted channel is also common to hide the communication content.
How does that look in practice?
Well, ransomware campaigns around 2020 often used application layer protocols, specifically HTTPS, for their C2. They also frequently used techniques like Ingress tool transfer to download powerful post-exploitation frameworks like Cobalt Strike onto victim machines. These Cobalt Strike beacons then provided persistent C2 access.
Okay, so they're in control, they've gathered the data. Now the final acts for many data thieves, exfiltration, getting it out.
Exfiltration is precisely that. Stealing the collected data by transferring it out of the target network. Common techniques include exfiltration over C2 channel, just sending the stolen data back through the existing command and control pathway, or sometimes using tactics like data transfer size limits, breaking the data into smaller chunks to maybe avoid detection by data loss prevention systems.
A major breach example.
The Equifax data breach in 2017 is a huge one. The attackers used exfiltration over their C2 channels, leveraging encryption to sneak out the personal data of around 147 million people. A massive data haul.
Just staggering. And then for some attackers, there's one final, often destructive step, impact. What's the ultimate damage they want to cause?
Impact is the tactic focused on disrupting, destroying, manipulating, or otherwise negatively affecting systems, data, or even physical processes. Techniques include data encrypted for impact, which is what ransomware does, or things like disk wipe, which aims to permanently destroy data on hard drives.
And this can go beyond just data, right?
Absolutely. The Triton malware attack in 2017 is a chilling example. It specifically targeted safety instrumented systems, SIS, in Saudi petrochemical plants. It used techniques analogous to data encryption for impact and disk wiping, but aimed at disrupting these critical safety controls. The goal appeared to be causing physical harm or damage. This attack, attributed to a Russian research institute, really underscored the potential for cyber attacks to have devastating real-world consequences.
That's a powerful and, quite unsettling example.
Yeah.
So stepping back, what does this whole life cycle, all these tactics, mean for you, the listener, interacting with technology every day?
Well, it reveals that even sophisticated attacks often follow a structured, somewhat predictable path. From that initial research, the reconnaissance, all the way through to the final impact. Understanding this playbook gives defenders and even informed users incredible foresight.
Right. Now, we spent a lot of time on the enterprise matrix, which is huge, but you mentioned other battlegrounds. The digital world isn't just corporate networks. Attacks on phones, power plants, cloud services, They must look different.
They absolutely do. And that's why any MITRE ATT&CK has these specialized matrices. They help us understand these unique environments. Take the mobile ATT&CK matrix. It focuses specifically on Android and iOS. While it shares some tactics with enterprise, it also has unique ones like network effects and remote service effects, reflecting how mobile devices are typically compromised and used. It's critical given how much sensitive personal data is on our phones now.
Yeah, absolutely. So how does an attack on your phone typically look? How do they get in?
Well, for initial access on mobile, a really prominent technique is exploiting vulnerabilities via applications. We saw this with NSO Group's Pegasus spyware. Between roughly 2016 and 2021, Pegasus used sophisticated zero-day exploits, often targeting apps like iMessage on iOS, to gain incredibly deep access to the devices of journalists, activists, and others. Malicious app installation, tricking users into installing spyware, is another common route.
And the impact on mobile? Is it just stealing data?
Not always. For the impact tactic on mobile, consider the Brata malware from 2021. This was an Android banking Trojan, but it also used techniques like data encrypted for impact to literally lock and encrypt the victim's phone, demanding a ransom.
Wow.
And I think what this really highlights is how the unique, almost intimate access a phone has to our personal lives, location, messages, camera, mic, changes the attack vectors and the potential for deep privacy violations, arguably even more so than a traditional computer sometimes.
That's a really important point.
Okay.
Moving from personal devices to something even more critical.
Yeah.
The Industrial Control Systems, or ICS, ATT&CK matrix.
Right. The ICS matrix is tailored for those critical infrastructure environments. Think energy grids, manufacturing plants, water treatment facilities, transportation systems. Here, the adversary's goal often isn't just stealing data. It's about causing physical disruption, damage, or even destruction. So it has unique tactics you won't see elsewhere, like inhibit response function and impair process control, which are specifically about messing with industrial operations.
Okay, this is where it gets really serious, isn't it? These aren't just data breaches. They can be real-world physical threats with potentially catastrophic outcomes. How do attackers operate here?
Well, for initial access into ICS environments, supply chain compromise is a major concern. Think back to Stuxnet in 2010, believed to be a U.S.-Israeli effort. It famously used supply chain compromise, infecting software used by a contractor for Iran's Natanz nuclear facility, and was likely introduced via USB drives to bridge the air gap and get that initial access into the target network.
And once inside,
Once Stuxnet was in, it used the impair process control tactic, specifically manipulating the control logic for centrifuges to subtly alter their speeds, ultimately causing physical damage to those machines. And then there's that other unique tactic, inhibit response function. Triton, that malware we discussed targeting the Saudi petrochemical plant in 2017, it employed techniques like block command message. This was designed to prevent the safety systems from executing their emergency shutdown procedures correctly, which could have led to a catastrophic failure. The goals here are starkly different, aiming for physical disruption, potentially endangering lives.
these examples really drive home how cybersecurity in the ICS world is fundamentally linked to physical safety and national security. It's a different ballgame.
It truly is.
Okay, finally, let's touch on the cloud ATT&CK matrix. How does that fit in?
The cloud matrix isn't entirely separate. It's more like a specialized view within the broader enterprise framework. It focuses specifically on how those familiar enterprise tactics play out in cloud environments. AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, Microsoft 365, various SaaS platforms. It uses the same 14 enterprise tactics, but the techniques are tailored to cloud-specific technologies and threats, reflecting things like shared responsibility models and cloud APIs.
Right. So how might initial access look different in the cloud compared to, say, getting into a traditional on-prem network?
Well, for cloud initial access, a very common technique is compromising valid cloud accounts. We saw widespread attacks in 2022 involving phishing Microsoft 365 credentials. Once attackers had those, they could directly log into corporate cloud environments.
And escalating privileges in the cloud.
Privilege escalation in the cloud often involves exploiting misconfigurations. The Capital One breach in 2019 is a classic case study. There, the attacker exploited a misconfigured IAM identity and access management role. This allowed them to use techniques like modifying cloud compute infrastructure permissions to escalate their privileges and ultimately gain access to sensitive customer data stored in S3 buckets.
And what about the impact tactic in the cloud? Can they cause physical damage like an ICS, or is it different?
It's generally different from direct physical damage, but the impact can still be severe, often financially and operationally. A good example is resource hijacking. There was a notable cryptojacking incident in Azure back in 2022 where attackers gained access and used resource hijacking techniques to run cryptocurrency mining scripts on the victim's Azure virtual machines. This didn't destroy data, but it consumed enormous computing resources, disrupted legitimate business operations, and ran up huge bills for the victim organization. So the impact is definitely
That
significant.
makes sense.
And really, if we connect this all back to the bigger picture, what it shows is how incredibly adaptable attackers are. They tailor their methods. Whether it's an on-premise server, your phone, a power plant's control system, or a cloud service, the core tactical goals, reconnaissance, access, persistence, impact often remain similar. But the specific techniques they use become highly specialized to exploit the unique workings and weaknesses of each specific environment.
So as we start to wrap up here, we've really journeyed through the power of the MITRE ATT&CK framework today. It provides this structured, constantly updated way to understand how cyber adversaries operate across all these different complex environments.
Exactly. And why this matters so much to you, the listener, is huge. By mapping real-world attacks, SolarWinds, Stuxnet, Pegasus, Capital One, all of them, to these specific tactics and techniques, organizations can get much better at detection, response, and mitigation. And it's not just for big companies. Understanding these patterns helps everyone engaging with technology. It's about shifting from being purely reactive, waiting for something bad to happen, to being more proactive, understanding the threats, and boosting your overall cybersecurity posture.
Right.
The framework's common language, its taxonomy, allows security teams everywhere to align their defenses, to hunt for threats more effectively, even to simulate attacks to test their own readiness.
So what this all boils down to is understanding the attacker's playbook helps us write a much better defense strategy.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Think about how this transparency, this structured approach of MITRE ATT&CK doesn't just help us as defenders, it also reveals a certain predictability, even in the most sophisticated attacks. So what impact does having this kind of structured knowledge, knowing the likely moves have on how we approach digital trust and security in our hyper-connected world, both for organizations and for us as individuals? Something to mull over.
That's a great point to ponder, and we definitely encourage you, if you're interested, to explore the MITRE ATT&CK website yourself. It's publicly available and constantly being updated with the latest intelligence. It's a living resource.
Highly recommended.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of MITRE ATT&CK. Until next time, stay safe out there.